I'm 75 now, and I can't remember anybody except the Queen bee.
The deal was already sealed before Camilla even stepped foot in the room. No delays, no shady backroom deals, and honest to God, no amount of PR spin could sugarcoat what just went down. The Privy Council straight up stripped her very last royal title and handed it right over to Princess Anne. Then came the plot twist literally nobody in the palace saw coming. Camilla completely lost her cool. She just broke down, and you could feel the whole room go dead silent. Right then, everyone realized this wasn't just standard protocol anymore. This was personal. Before we spill more tea on what this actually means for the royal family, hit that subscribe button so you never miss an update. It was pretty much a done deal by the time Camilla stepped into the room. No dragging this out, no shady backroom deals, and honest to God, no amount of PR spin could sugarcoat what just went down. The Privy Council, you know, that high-level board that makes the real calls, straight up stripped her very last title and handed all that power right over to Anne, effective immediately. Zero transition period. Pure savage. And look, this wasn't just about what people call her at dinner parties. This wiped out the very last thing in the palace that was uniquely hers. When the final words dropped, you could see Camilla reach back and grab a chair, knuckles turning white. She barely choked out a question, asking if it was really final. And man, that dead silence in the room said everything before anyone even opened their mouth. Charles sat there completely frozen for a second, then jumped up so fast his chair practically slid back. But the king? He barely said a word. And honestly, that quiet hit way harder than if he'd thrown a fit. Camilla knew right then and there, either he couldn't undo this, or he'd already decided he wasn't gonna try. No triumph, no nothing. Just him watching the room. Turns out Anne was in on it before the meeting even started. She knew the title was coming her way, which made every side eye in that room heavy as hell. Anne knew this wasn't some victory lap to pop champagne over. But Camilla, completely rattled, was stuck with a way darker thought. How long had Anne known about this? And how long had everyone else been planning for a future where she's totally out of the picture? Then another detail dropped that completely flipped the script. Right there on the table sat a sealed council doc unopened, packed with all the messy reasons behind the move, plus a nod to some earlier palace showdown that basically made Camilla totally indefensible, as staff ended up escorting her out. Anne turned to Charles and asked point-blank if Camilla was ever told what actually sparked the council's final hammer blow. And honestly, that one question was way more dangerous than the decree itself. To really get why, we've got to look at the three people whose private drama was tearing this whole thing apart from the inside. At the end of the day, behind all these royal mandates, you've still got real humans who have to look each other in the eye. For Charles, this wasn't just his wife getting publicly humiliated by the system, it was a total head-on collision between his marriage and the crown. For Camilla, the loss cut deep, it felt brutally personal, and for Anne, taking what was stripped from another woman dumped a heavy-ass burden on her shoulders that she never even asked for. The palace made its call. Now, the family had to survive the fallout. Camilla pulled herself together enough to speak. But her first question had zero to do with royal protocol. She wanted to know if Charles knew beforehand. The king hesitated for just a split second, and man, that tiny pause changed everything. As the boss, he was supposed to back up the institution's call, but as her husband, she expected him to lay his cards on the table before they even walked into that room. And that clash was huge, because if he tried to block the ruling, it would have looked like he was putting personal loyalty ahead of his royal duties. Charles tried to play it off, saying he only got a heads up, not a sure thing. The council was mulling over some heavy moves, but he talked himself into believing the whole thing would fall apart before it ever came to a vote. So, he kept her in the dark about how bad it really was, hoping to shield her from a shitstorm that might never even hit. Instead, that quiet left her staring down something way worse. She started wondering if he was actually trying to protect her feelings, or if he was just saving his own skin from a brutally uncomfortable conversation. Anne was carrying a whole different kind of heavy. Her whole rep in the family was built on putting duty before comfort, which is exactly why they dumped these new responsibilities right in her lap. The suits had already briefed her on what was changing, so she knew the grind that came with the territory. And that was another gut punch for Camilla. The prep work had obviously started way before the official announcement, meaning the whole machine was turning behind her back while she was kept completely in the dark. Anne caught Charles by himself in the hallway and cut straight to the chase. No celebration, no bullshit. She told him point blank that she'd step up and do what was required, but she wouldn't let anyone spin Camilla's public humiliation as her personal victory lap. She got it. This title was a heavy burden, not a trophy. Charles just said under his breath that the call wasn't up to them anymore. He'd let the wheels keep spinning to the very end, and now they were both stuck in the aftermath, whether they liked it or not. Camilla caught enough of it to piece the whole puzzle together. Her rage stopped being about losing the title and turned entirely on all the shady secrecy. She demanded to see the actual council doc that pulled the trigger, forcing Charles to finally face the one elephant in the room nobody dared name. And once that buried showdown was dragged back into the light, this collapse didn't look sudden at all. It looked like the inevitable hangover from something that went sour weeks ago. Every royal mess has that one tiny moment that seems like no big deal, until you look back and realize, yep, that's where the whole thing blew up. In this story, that moment went down in a closed-door planning meeting weeks before the council ever voted. One bad call, one line crossed, and a cold-as-ice exchange between Camilla and Anne that had everyone in the room going, "Holy shit, we just saw the beginning of the end." So Camilla walks into this meeting thinking she's got enough muscle to boss people around. They were hashing out the layout for this huge state ceremony. We're talking seating charts, walking order. Who steps out first? Stuff where precedence is everything. And look, precedent is basically just the royal food chain. It tells the world who's got real pull and who's just window dressing. Camilla looks at the plan, doesn't even bother asking Charles, and straight up orders Anne's spot to be moved. She figured her title gave her all the juice she needed. Anne was not having it. The princess grabs the updated paper, skims the new seating chart, and calmly slides it right back across the table. She basically goes, "I'm not following orders from someone who doesn't have the authority to give them." Camilla shoves the paper back at her. She keeps her voice steady, but you could cut the tension with a knife. She makes it crystal clear her call isn't up for debate. What she says goes. Anne didn't even touch the paper a second time. She just stood up, left the damn thing sitting on the table and walked out without saying another word. The suits in the room just froze. And that quiet? That was the real killer. This wasn't just two women throwing shade anymore. This was a full-blown crisis over who actually gets to speak for the king. The staff wrote down every single detail in the official notes, turning a nasty family feud into black and white receipts of a total power struggle inside the palace. Charles later tried to smooth things over behind closed doors, asking everyone to sweep it under the rug without any drama or public humiliation. He wanted to contain the fallout, but his interference backfired big time. It just made the council even more spooked. They realized right then that the ambiguity around Camilla's role was a ticking time bomb they couldn't ignore anymore. Camilla didn't discover the most brutal detail until after she broke down, when she finally got her hands on the official records. The sentence that actually nailed her coffin shut didn't even come from Anne. It was tucked inside an attached recommendation, warning that unclear authority at upcoming state events was a total disaster waiting to happen. That one line flipped the script. Camilla knew who called her out in the room, but now she realized someone else used that moment to build a rock-solid case against her. And before she went hunting for the real mastermind, she wanted one answer straight from Anne's own mouth. The palace could control the paperwork, but they couldn't stop the showdown that was about to go down. Camilla wanted a face-to-face with Anne. No secretaries, no advisors, and zero PR-filtered bullshit. She wanted to know if the king's sister just took the title because it fell in her lap, or if she actively stabbed her in the back for it. When the two women finally went toe-to-toe, neither of them raised their voice at first. That cold restraint made the whole room feel like a powder keg. Camilla shut the door herself and turned around to face Anne. She'd read the insider report, seen how their seating chart feud was weaponized, and convinced herself that Anne's pushback was the falling domino that wrecked everything. Anne only agreed to the sit-down because dodging it would look even worse. Plus, she knew the damn difference between calling out fake authority and pulling a power move to steal it, and she was gonna make sure Camilla knew the difference too. Camilla didn't beat around the bush for a second. "Did you ask them to take it from me?" she demanded. Anne paused, then answered coolly that she'd only asked for clear-cut rules. The princess insisted it was never a personal turf war over a title. It was about who actually had the green light to give orders, and that ambiguity had already shattered trust in the royal chain of command. Camilla heard the self-righteous duty pitch in every single word, and she absolutely hated it. She called Anne out for hiding behind high-minded principles while reaping all the rewards of her public humiliation. The queen consort was completely done keeping up appearances. Anne fired right back, telling her straight up that she never asked for the damn title in the first place, and she'd drop it like a hot potato if it would fix the real issue. But handing it back wouldn't wipe away the official receipts, the power struggle, or the red flags that had already reached the council's desk. Then Anne dropped a bombshell Camilla never saw coming. She admitted she'd actually attended a hush-hush council sit-down before the final vote, basically an off-the-record meeting where the big wigs hashed out the crisis before making it official. And get this, Anne said she actually fought against taking the title right away, warning them it would look less like a policy tweak and more like a public execution. Camilla's rage instantly short-circuited. If Anne was the one pumping the brakes, then someone else was pushing the pedal to the floor. She asked point-blank who insisted the situation was a hazard that had to be dealt with now. The princess froze again, and this time you could hear a pin drop. Anne finally looked her in the eye and spilled the real tea. The voice that sealed her fate came from someone sitting way closer to the throne than she ever imagined. Camilla stared at her, and it hit her like a ton of bricks. She'd been going after the completely wrong person this whole time. The face-off ended with zero closure. But the real war zone was finally laid bare, and spoiler alert, it wasn't some catfight between two royal women. The call was coming from inside the house, the very system surrounding Charles himself. Camilla had spent hours pinning everything on Anne, but the cold, hard truth was way more brutal. A massive move like this couldn't just happen because a sibling threw a tantrum or one meeting went south. Someone behind the scenes played the long game, turning a rumor into a formal process, that process into a vote, and that vote into a done deal you can't walk back. When Charles finally sat down alone and opened the full council binder, he saw the whole paper trail mapped out in front of him. And honestly, he realized just how little room the king actually had to wiggle out of this. Charles went through every single page, line by line. The argument on paper was simple. Keeping Camilla's title was creating way too much overlap and confusion about who actually calls the shots during major royal gigs. And after that big blow-up with Anne, the suits decided the gray area was officially a liability. They wanted those duties handed off to someone whose authority wouldn't be questioned for a second. Anne was the obvious play. She's senior, she's seasoned, and everyone in the family knows she's not using a royal title for clout. Then Charles got to the signature page with the final stamp of approval, and he completely froze. He took off his glasses, set them down next to the file, and went dead silent. The king got the message loud and clear. If he tried to pull rank and protect Camilla now, it might save face today. But he'd be forced to publicly defend her mess after his own top advisors already flagged her as a risk. And even worse, that original seating chart disaster would get leaked to the press, and there'd be no sweeping it under the rug. At one crucial moment, the ball was totally in his court. Charles didn't orchestrate the coup, and he didn't demand Camilla get stripped of her title, but the paper trail proved he had a golden opportunity to hit pause on the council's final process. He just chose to stand down in his head. Charles convinced himself that playing dumb was the only way to prevent a total nuclear meltdown. If he pulled strings to save his wife, accusations of favoritism would blow up right alongside toxic questions about who's really running the show behind palace doors. He figured taking one brutal loss on the chin might contain the damage before it brought down the whole institution. But that cold, calculating play to save the crown opened up a massive personal wound he couldn't cover up anymore. Camilla found out the hard truth when she read the council's official minutes later that day. She zeroed in on the exact line confirming a delay was on the table, then looked straight at Charles, dead calm, no screaming. The queen consort didn't even ask if she could get her title back. She just asked why the hell he let her walk into that room believing she still had a fighting chance. Charles stumbled through an excuse, but the damage was already done. She was done crying. Her grief had turned into pure, ice-cold distance. The title officially flipped. But the real aftermath was just getting warmed up. Because Camilla finally realized that when push came to shove, the man who was supposed to have her back quietly decided the crown couldn't afford to save her by the next morning. The vibe in the palace was totally different before anyone even uttered a word. Calendars were rewritten, briefs were rerouted. Anne was already getting handed the exact duties that belonged to Camilla just hours before, and every silent tweak sent the exact same chilling message. The palace didn't need another dramatic press release. It was just gonna keep rolling right along, acting like the role had already forgotten the woman who used to fill it. Camilla caught on to the shift first through the paper trail. Ceremonial briefs, seating charts, official invites, and high-level strategy notes were getting rerouted straight to Anne's desk almost instantly. Those papers were everything. They dictated who got looped in, who showed up where, and who held the reins during royal gigs. But honestly, the sheer speed of it was way more brutal than the decision itself. It was living proof that someone had this whole thing prepped and ready to roll way before she ever heard the hammer fall. Camilla stared down at the updated schedule and froze at one specific line. Anne's name was printed right where hers had been sitting just yesterday. She read it once, then read it again like staring at it might magically rewrite the page. It didn't. The queen consort folded the paper real neat and asked her aide to step out. Zero rage in her voice, and that silence made the vibe in the room heavy as hell. Charles came by later to talk things out, but the wall between them was already set in stone. The king tried to rehash why he let the machine keep turning, but she cut him off before he could even finish. Camilla told him losing the title wasn't even the worst part. What cut deep was knowing he had all this time to brace himself, while she was allowed to walk straight into that council room still hoping for a miracle. Anne was dealing with the exact opposite headache. Staff hinted at doing some formal handover to mark the occasion, but she shut that down fast. The princess insisted her new duties kick off under the radar, with 0 victory laps. She got it. Taking on the workload was one thing, but turning another woman's public embarrassment into a photo op was a bridge too far. And God knows the family had already paid way too big a price for that boundary to slip. Camilla made her own power move right after. She yanked several high-profile gigs off her calendar, the ones tied straight to the clout she'd just lost, and completely passed on fighting the transfer. And honestly, her cold absence spoke way louder than any screaming match. Every single empty chair at events where she was supposed to show up was a brutal reminder to Charles that his passive silence had real-world fallout. That silent treatment finally broke him. Charles quit hiding behind his advisors, stopped using PR-vetted soundbites, and went to hunt Camilla down himself. After days of hiding behind institutional machinery, the drama finally boiled down to just the two of them. No council files, no ceremonial pomp, and 0 excuses left to hide behind. For the first time since this whole shitstorm hit, there were no round tables, no protocol charts, and no suits waiting in the hall to translate real emotions into sanitized royal spin. Just Charles and Camilla, face to face. He wasn't playing the king anymore, and she wasn't fighting for some title. What went down next didn't undo the decision. But it did something way bigger. It forced them both to put all their cards on the table and spit out the truth they'd been terrified to admit since day one. Charles insisted on this, one-on-one with 0 aides in the room, because every formal chat had only driven the wedge deeper. He got that another message delivered through staff would just sound like the crown regurgitating corporate lines instead of a husband talking to his wife. Camilla walked in totally aware that getting her title back was a lost cause. But honestly, she also knew that getting reinstated by the system wasn't even what she wanted anymore. The damage went way deeper than just some fancy title. Charles finally coughed up the truth he'd been dodging this whole time. He straight up admitted he knew he could have hit pause on that vote. He apologized for letting Camilla get blindsided inside that council room instead of giving her a heads up that the heat was real. No excuses this time. He just owned up to the fact that he thought playing dumb would protect her from panicking, only to realize it left her totally defenseless when the hammer dropped. Camilla just sat there and let him talk. Then she dropped a truth bomb of her own. Losing the title sucked, but getting treated like a child hurt way worse. She could have swallowed a defeat. What she couldn't stomach was knowing Charles was walking around carrying the truth alone, letting her play the fool and hope for a miracle that was never coming. Her rage finally ran out of steam, leaving behind a cold, quiet burn that hurt even more. That's when Camilla pulled the ultimate power move that flipped the script on this whole crisis. She wasn't gonna fight Anne, she wasn't gonna appeal the ruling, and she wasn't gonna start a rogue faction. She was simply walking away from the whole damn mess, and that was huge. It completely killed the chance of a drawn-out royal civil war and saved the palace from their ultimate nightmare. Two rival queens fighting for clout. Charles took the hit without promising to fix it. He agreed that their marriage couldn't be used to smudge the line between pillow talk and official power anymore. For the first time since this whole mess started, neither of them was trying to win. They were just trying to survive it. Their private truce took the heat off the palace indoor drama. But outside those iron gates, the world was just finding out what went down. And while Charles and Camilla were finally having a quiet moment, the headlines out on the street were literally going nuclear. By sunrise, the secret was officially out. A newspaper front page outside Buckingham Palace screamed, "Camilla stripped of title," and the story went viral way faster than PR could contain it. What started as a secret deal was now getting roasted in the court of public opinion. But the reaction wasn't as simple as one woman winning and another taking an L. The palace dropped a clean press release calling the transfer a clarification of ceremonial duties, basically corporate speak for, "This isn't a slap in the face, just a reshuffle." But the public saw right through it. All they heard was humiliation, palace infighting, and a nasty royal power struggle. And that was the problem. The drama turned a boring bureaucratic ruling into a messy human story, making every official statement sound ice-cold. Outside the palace, a crowd gathered as a newsie held up the morning paper for everyone to see. You literally couldn't miss that headline. People whipped out their phones, taking pics, while others just stared in disbelief. Suddenly, the tea was real for regular folks who'd never read a council doc or heard the shouting matches behind closed doors. That one front page became the moment that defined the entire scandal. Anne felt the heat right away. She pulled up to her first official gig under her new title, knowing damn well that every look on her face would be scrutinized for either smugness or guilt. But the princess refused to give the press a soundbite about Camilla. She kept it strictly business. That self-control was everything, because even a smirk would have looked like a victory lap. Instead, she treated the new gig like a heavy burden, not a trophy. Camilla totally flipped the script without saying a word. Everyone was bracing for her to go on the warpath, take shots at Charles, pick a fight with Anne, try to claw back what she lost, but her total silence actually won people over. The queen consort stopped looking like the loser of a palace catfight and started looking like a woman taking a brutal hit with pure class. And that's when the media narrative completely shifted. Major news outlets started framing this not as a public humiliation, but as a rare moment where the crown put cold, hard duty above personal relationships. Suddenly, the whole conversation changed from Camilla got stripped to look at the brutal price of royal duty. By the time the sun went down, the title itself wasn't even the main story anymore. Camilla wasn't getting it back. Anne was taking on the workload. Charles made his bed and had to lie in it. The only real question left was, how do they all live with this? And was the sacrifice even worth it for the crown? Because at the end of the day, nobody really won here. Anne got the title, but it feels more like a heavy chore than a trophy. Charles saved the institution, but he completely crushed his wife to do it. And Camilla lost the one final thing in the palace she thought was uniquely hers. Yet, That initial breakdown isn't how history's gonna remember her. Her final play was choosing to walk away from a lost cause with her head held high and her dignity completely intact. Anne took over the new duties quietly. No fuss, no victory laps, and zero attempts to spin it as a win. The decree is set in stone. Charles isn't reversing anything, and the palace just redrew its boundaries, making it crystal clear who actually holds the power moving forward. And that line in the sand is everything, because this whole mess started the second pillow talk and official power got too tangled up to separate. Now, the boundary is crystal clear. Camilla gets one last doc with her former title printed on it. She stares at it for a second, pulls it out of her personal binder and sets it on the desk to be sent back. No yelling, no demanding a revote. Zero breakdowns this time. The exact same woman who fell apart when the news dropped just accepts what is, and honestly, that cold, quiet move spoke way louder than any screaming match ever could. Anne reaches out in her own way. The princess sends Camilla a private handwritten note, making it crystal clear she's not treating this title as a trophy or proof she won. She writes straight up, "Duty can be passed down without making it a humiliation parade." Camilla reads it alone, folds it real neat, and saves it. It doesn't wipe away the blood on the floor between them, but it puts an end to the feud. Charles sees the wreckage for what it really is now. The king saved the institution, but he's gotta own the fact that his passive silence ripped his marriage apart. He can't play dumb anymore. Saving the crown and protecting the people he loves aren't always the same thing. What started with Camilla totally collapsing under the weight of a shock move ends with her standing on her own 2 feet. No title, no clout, but done fighting a lost cause. Anne shoulders the load. Charles carries the guilt. And the crown keeps rolling right along with one brutal lesson written on the wall. Inside the monarchy, love might run the family, but cold, hard duty runs the show. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and we'll catch you guys in the next one.